Well, I wanted to talk about the trapping part of this because when we talked about immersion in the consciousness of another creature,
Mm-hmm.
I think that was as close you must have been as close to that as you can get at times in your life, trying to figure out where they go, what they're doing, and how to catch them.
Yeah, it's when we were doing the winter work, I would learn from where they traveled, how they traversed a landscape, where they would stop to rest, what kind of places did they sit in, did they have a lookout, where they stopped to investigate smells, where their boundaries were, where they were more likely to scent mark. That's how you catch them, and these different things. Or hunting, how successful were they as hunters? And wolves are not particularly successful. They're certainly not like a mountain lion. um, and I learned that stuff from actually going where the wolf went and his tracks on my skis. And then in the summertime, I would use that information to catch them. And I learned to trap wolves. The first thing I ever set a trap for was a wolf, which is sort of like starting at the Olympics the first time you put on a pair of skates. I mean, they're
Yeah.
difficult, right? But I was taught by the best, and I learned pretty quickly, and I learned the hard way through mistakes. But when I was trapping wolves, I was very in tune with what was going on. The scent around the sights, both sight visual and sight on the ground, um, and feeling my way through. Is this a place where if I was a wolf, I would stop? It was very intuitive. Became just really a. It became my subconscious and moving into my conscious. Really.
When I was you were boiling the traps in this alder bark solution. I noticed that like anything to remove the last vestige of human scent as much as you could.
Hmm.
And then how did you figure all that out?
I was taught that in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I was taught by the last of the old time wolf trappers before they couldn't trap them anymore when they became endangered, in 1974 or so. Um, I was taught so
And
that and you can read about that stuff, and then you just try what works. If you don't do all that, the wolves are not going to get caught.
I saw, and you had a lot of times where there nothing there.
Oh my God. For every hour of excitement, you had weeks of nothing. And I had a couple of particular wolves that were real challenging to catch, and I learned a lot. They made a fool of me many times, and I had other ones that were easier and more naive. But I got to the point in my career where every time I caught a wolf, I would apologize. I'd see it, caught by its foot, and they don't know what that is. They're used to being tops in the animal world. All of a sudden, here's this human walk on up to them, and I presume they think you're going to kill them.
Sure.
That's probably their last conscious thought, and then I poke them with a jab stick and give them the drugs, and then when they wake up, they're all alone with a collar on, and But I used to feel a little bad about it towards the end. Yeah.
Yeah. And the purpose of the study was to figure out where they go and what they eat, like so that you could get kind of a conflict resolution maybe for the future. Was it?
Well, it was early on, and nobody had studied wolves in the Western U.S. ever. They studied how to kill them for decades, right?
Gotcha. Right.
So we had to kind of learn everything. How big are their territories? The wolves in the West have very different ecology than the wolves back in the Midwest because of what they eat and the landscape they live on. How many of them are actually going to be livestock killers? Wasn't much livestock in the North Fork. How big was their territories? What happened when they encountered an adjacent pack? Did they kill them, chase them, play with them? I mean, all of this stuff, it was an unknown. And of course, what they ate and how they caught it. And then sampling what was available for them to eat. Not just, oh, well, they ate, 58% of their diet was whitetail. Well, was 50% of the wild meat available whitetail, or 10%, in which case they'd be strongly selecting for it. So we had to also sample what was on the landscape through hunter check stations and aerial flights.
So I wanted to go to chapter 8, which is like the chapter about trying to find Phyllis.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just like that. There's so much happening in that chapter. And I think that at that time you were kind of you were kind of arriving in your skills and your understanding of the place.
Hmm.
Um, And could you talk about that wolf a little bit?
So Phyllis was the matriarch of the North Fork after the first breeding female disappeared. Don't know what happened to her. Radio calorie batteries went out. She had had one litter in 82. And then Phyllis came on the scene and she whelped pups in 85. And she was really unique in that she was nearly white when she was a young animal, which is an unusual color morph in this area. It's pretty normal up in the Arctic, but she was really unique. So she was easy to spot in from the air. If you were tracking and you had a beep radio collar and you'd fly and you'd see, Phyllis down there. But she was caught the first time accidentally by Bruce McClellan in a grizzly bear snare. So she had never actually been stuck in a wolf trap, but she was caught in a snare. So she had the smell, the metal, human smell, and all that. And after that, I spent years trying to catch her, years. And I never recaptured her. I caught her mates, her siblings, her children, her grandchildren. And I had kind of envisioned when Phyllis came by a trap, and she'd kind of get the wolves, hey guys, pay attention here. And she'd kind of point. It's like, this is really bad juju. Don't mess with this. And she'd dig them up a little bit. She actually could pull a trap, a set trap, out of the ground without setting it off and then leave it sitting there exposed. I'd come driving along. It's like, what the hell? There's this trap sitting on the side of the trail, unsprung. And sometimes
Yeah.
even flipped upside down and not sprung.
So, what does that tell you about like their intelligence or what how they think? Any does it tell you anything? Like what who would do that?
All I can say is I can't think like a wolf, but some wolves really stand out in that they would challenge me intellectually, physically, and for example, this wolf who knew all about traps. Why is it that of all my years at Moose City, one time I saw a wolf there, and this was as Phyllis was getting to be old. I saw this white colored animal, light colored animal on the end of the runway. We were landing our airplane in just the grassy meadow. It was not a real runway. It was very long, close to a mile. And I watched her. I got outside with my binoculars and I ran and got one of my volunteers and we hid behind a building and we sat and we watched her walking and she just kept trotting and trotting and trotting all the way up the length of that entire meadow and got right very close to my cabin within a stone's throw essentially and stood there and stared at it for a while. And then she turned around and went back exactly where she had come from. Why would she do that? I, I have no idea, but it was, you talk about sort of the connections when you're living closer to the earth. You feel these connections. She had no love for me, certainly, but I think she was just trying to tell me, yeah, I'm still here and I'm still smarter than you are, and we'll see you around. And she was gone.
Right,
It was the
right.
strangest experience. And the fact that I happened to see her and it was daylight. Maybe she came in at night when there was no snow. I mean, I don't know. I never knew her to be there.
Wow.
No, and except for when I could see her, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, and she had a very long life, and we were able to follow her till her eventual demise. And that's unusual with wolves because usually they just disappear and they die, and you don't know what happens to them.
Yeah. And somebody shot her, an outfitter shot her way up north, right?
In Alberta, yeah,
Yeah.